Keith and Chris, we now got time to take a look at the next sector, the industrial production for aerospace and the miscellaneous equipment. Let me go ahead and share the screen. And okay. As usual, aerospace is all over the map.
Yeah.
And the model does look a lot like it did last month. Last month, you could see it had a little bit more of a whip at the back end of it. It still has a really pretty wide, especially towards the end of it, wide, we like to call it the cone of variability, but it's still fairly wide, about almost 30 points difference in what the potential forecast. But in general, it's still saying we're going up. And from what I can, from the novice about, what the numbers mean, I'm reading in the papers that, they're building planes. So that's what I'm seeing being reflected here. The story has remained relatively the same.
Yeah, and aerospace has always been unique because the lead times are so long. I mean, it's not like the airlines can say, hey, I think we're going to need some more planes in November. Let's build a couple. I mean, these orders go out 5, 10, 15 years. And two things have tended to drive the desire to buy and have new planes built. One, of course, is demand, and that's been hard to predict for the last year or so because there's been restrictions on travel, then the travel restrictions are lifted, then they're back, and then the consumer, we all know that drill. But the other one that's a little more consistent is jet fuel use. And when the price of fuel was down, you didn't see as much demand for the new fuel sipper airplanes. But now that those fuel prices are on the way up and expected to stay up, now all of a sudden companies that were kind of like, yeah, well, I'm kind of interested in the fuel efficient jet, but not that fuel efficient. Now they're like, oh God, I've got to buy a new fleet. And we also have to remember that most of the new orders that have been coming, particularly for Boeing, but Airbus as well, are coming from overseas. I mean, it's not the American Airlines and United Airlines, though they're certainly buying too. It's all the international purchasers that are driving a lot of that business because, frankly, Boeing and Airbus are the only two games in town.
Yeah, and I would just add, in this particular period of time, it's odd too, because, we had challenges with the 737 MAX. And so Boeing had all that production on hold for a little over a year, starting back in 2019. So now you've kind of got all of that pushing forward, and, all that production really is starting to come back into, back into play. A lot of the backlogs or a lot of the inventory that Boeing had sitting on tarmacs have been fulfilled. All that backlog has now been used up, and so
and
now
Airbus had the same kind of issue because they were making the wrong plane. They miscalculated and decided there was a huge market for the big wide body airplane, and then that fell through the roof. And they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be building these big jobs, and we should be building more like the 737 MAX. So both airlines kind of shot themselves in the foot. Airbus made the wrong call at the wrong time, and Boeing kind of hastened the plane to production before it was really ready. So
yeah. So a lot of that pent up demand, I mean, is really kind of pulling forward, and that's why I think we see such an aggressive curve here.
Okay.
But the other thing too, one of the impacts of this, which is interesting, is you've got tens of thousands of suppliers that have been somewhat on hold, not just because of the pandemic, but even starting in like 2019, been kind of put on hold. And now they're kind of getting to the point where a lot of that production needs to start to ramp up. And so they're hitting a period of time that they haven't seen in nearly 24 months. So there's a little bit of a delay here and a little bit of a lag in them getting back in cycle, getting those supply chains going. And just like we see across other sectors, there's shortages of certain raw materials, and some of the materials that they're going to need to be able to build those planes are going to be difficult to get. So that's why maybe the curve is not even more aggressive than it probably could be. But a lot of that's stretching out. And then as supply chains get back in cycle mid-year of 2022, that's when you really start to see it take off.
Yeah, and if you look at it with those suppliers, the estimate is there's 15 to 20,000 suppliers for Boeing alone. And during the crisis of last year, a lot of those small companies went out of business altogether. And so you've had to find replacements for them. They may be coming from overseas. You may be firing up operations in more often. And I hear this from a lot of the manufacturers. Aerospace was one of their customer sections. And when that fell out, they shifted and did more for other sectors. They did more in construction. They did more in agriculture, whatever it was. Now, aerospace is coming back, but they're like, well, I'm already busy with my new business. I've already got all kinds of orders from these guys because you ditched me for a year. So, yeah, I'm not really in a hurry to meet your demands because my new customers are keeping me busy. You can just wait. And the aerospace people are like, yeah, but we're aerospace. So yeah, you are, and you dumped me for a year. And I don't appreciate that, and I'm gonna stick with the people who've been giving me business. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at our long range, and it's the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie, who
Yep.
airline industry and is inherently Scottish. So we've got, you can see it's really volatile over many, many years, and you got the neck sticking out there. What's going on now?
This is actually a schematic of Coney Island, but we just don't tell anybody this.
Well, we do have to remind everybody that again, these models are all data driven, and right now this is what the data and what the models are showing us. John, I mean, the accuracy on this particular model has been pretty good, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been over 90%. We're sitting usually around like the 94 percentile on this one. 90 on month to month, we're over 98%, but
Right.
over a quarter, we're sitting usually are like around 94%.
So we're still hitting pretty good. So right now the data is showing this kind of the Loch Ness Monster head version of it. So, but we do update these month over month, and as new data flows in, that out curve could change a bit. But generally, I mean, it's a rebound, it's a growth story, and that's probably the primary takeaway from it.
All right, and then we'll take a look at year over year.
Yeah,
you're seeing that same. You're seeing the beginning of the neck there. It doesn't show the because we don't show deep into 2022 on the year over year, which we'll be updating that soon and probably needing to drop off maybe 2014 and 2015 in the future.
Well,
For
again,
readability.
this is another reason why I love this particular chart, because we get excited about that growth curve that we see. But when you look at this, other than, let's forget the pandemic year for a second, but we are still below where we have been, over the last, 7 years or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you may not be feeling, there may be folks saying, hey, I don't feel that acceleration yet. And absolutely, I mean, the data in the chart bears that out, that you're still not back to where you were at, peak manufacturing back in 2014. We still got a long way to go before.
And it's also important to recognize that this is one of those intermediate sectors. I mean, we're looking at aerospace, which feeds into the airlines, and there's only one customer for aerospace, and that's the airline industry. So anything that's affecting them is going to trickle down to affect the aerospace in general. And all we've heard all summer is there's a shortage of pilots, there's a shortage of flight attendants, there's a shortage of baggage handlers, there's a shortage of gate agents. None of that's going to be going away soon, and a lot of the airlines are responding to it by reducing service. They're taking flights out of service, they're grounding airplanes, they're changing routes. They're even reacting to the fact that consumer demand may still be there, but they can't provide the service. I mean, the last couple of days I've been flying 3 delays that were entirely based on personnel. There was a delay because they couldn't get the baggage loaded on a plane because they didn't have enough baggage handlers, and we had to wait for them to load 3 other planes before they could load ours. Second delay was air traffic control. They didn't have enough air traffic controllers. We had to wait for the next shift to come in and before we could take off. And then the third one was that we had to wait for a replacement flight attendant because one of the others couldn't make it, and we had to wait for her to fly in from another city to get on the plane and service. And so none of these were weather, they weren't equipment, they weren't any, it was like people. We don't have enough people.
But the
And
official reported reason will be weather.
right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's weather or aliens, I've noticed. You know, aliens.
One of the
are-
two.
Yeah, right.
Or the dog in the back. You know, one of
Yeah,
the two.
exactly. Exactly. My
Yeah,
cat got bored and left. So
I did see a report yesterday. Airlines were reporting that because of Delta,
yeah.
and not the airline, but the variant, you know, they're starting to see a drop off in passenger traffic now, because leisure travel, Chris, was right back up to like 95, 96% of normal. They're now starting to see that drop off month over month, down about double digits.
Yeah, and it's mostly
10,
business
20%.
travel still. What you're running in, this is the time of year where leisure travel dips because summer's over and the fall hasn't arrived. They are still seeing good reservations for the coming holiday season. People are still going to travel to see family, but the business sector, which is what they really bread and butter for the airlines, there's still a lot of reluctance. You're not seeing people flying again. I've been back on the speaker circuit and the meetings are happening. But for example, the one that I was at on Monday, you know, normally they'll poll 250, 300 people. They had 170. The group that I did on Tuesday, normally they're going to have 500, 600 people. They had 400. So not bad numbers, but I mean a third down, a half down from what they were.
Yeah, yeah. And cancellations are up, not
Yeah.
just events, but I mean, airlines are reporting that they're getting a significant increase in the number of cancellations.
Yep.
So yeah, it's interesting.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I think that
Fantastic.
draws us to the conclusion of this sector.
Yeah, we'll pick this back up and do another one of these next month when we'll get the new model updates.
All righty.
Thanks.